Thanks very much, Andy, for setting this up. Thanks, Trevor, for being here. By way of background, a third of my life is devoted to Africa. And I work principally with elephants, with a fantastic group of African colleagues. And, everybody thinks that Africa is full of huge, wild national parks, and that's true. But one of the things that we've learned from studying elephants in Kruger National Park and all across Southern Africa, which is sort of Tanzania and south, has two-thirds, three-quarters of the savanna elephants. Um, but elephants don't like being behind fences. They don't like being imprisoned in what we call fortress conservation. They need to move, and they need room to roam. So one of the challenges that we have is to find corridors, habitat corridors for elephants to move from one place to another, particularly when conditions get too bad in one place. And without going into that in a lot of detail, what Trevor has been doing is to create a habitat corridor. Well, at Saving Nature, we do habitat corridors. That's something we understand is enormously important. So a few years back, we got a proposal from Trevor's group, and he wanted to help us fund a piece of a habitat corridor. And I was hugely fortunate 2.5 years ago was to go and visit the project, and it's really pretty impressive. So habitat corridors for elephants, making sure elephants can move around when they need to, is what Trevor's been doing. It's enormously complicated politically, and I think without further ado, Trevor, over to you, mate.
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart, for the intro. And please, everyone, welcome Trevor. We're excited to have you here today. Trevor?
Thank you for having me. It's great to
Perfect.
be here.
Perfect. Yes. I'd like to start it off at the beginning. Before Tanzania, your career started far away from elephants in Scotland, actually, with seabirds like the Arctic skuas, you see in the bottom left. Can you take us back to the early days? How did you first fall in love with these wild places and realize this was a life you wanted to dedicate yourself to?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. Um, yeah, looking forward to chatting. This is probably the hardest bit because I don't often look back and don't often think about, about myself and the journey. But I gave a little bit of thought. I think, everyone has their own journey. For me, I can't identify a single event or place or person in my childhood like some people can, that really, was a singular inspiration. Um, Actually, I grew up in suburbia in southern England, which is one of the most nature depleted parts of the world. And it was a difficult childhood. And I think that when I left home at 16, I was reacting and escaping to different things. And one of the things that I liked to escape to was to go walking in nature and really kind of for the first time consciously feel that excitement and that joy of hiking and looking at birds and learning about nature. Um, and as a rule of thumb, there are exceptions, for example, where Stuart is now, but as a rule of thumb in the UK, if you want to get to really like wild and exciting places, you go north and especially right up into northern Scotland. So that's what I started going there, more and more. I threw myself into some other passions. I was like studying philosophy at
Oh,
university and um, doing radical politics and punk rock and all sorts of stuff. But over time, quite soon, nature was the thing that I most loved um, engaging with. And so I approached the Scottish Wildlife Trust and started volunteering for them, doing bits of work around the Highlands. anything I could, like that got me into the field, learning, botanizing, monitoring seabirds, doing badger set surveys, um, and anything possible. And I kind of realized that that was the life for me, and I had this burning passion that I'm not sure where it came from, but for wildlife and the natural world, and I was investigating the issues around it, and I realized that that was what I wanted to spend my life doing and put energies into trying to help save and protect wildlife and the natural world. Um, of course, that and so work has always been that, and my passion is that, and that means there can be a blurring between life and work, which brings its own challenges. Um, but of course, I'm lucky enough to also spend a lot of time living and working in incredible places, and just never stop learning about the wonders of the natural world. Um, from doing field work and spending time in the Scottish Highlands, I thought that being a wildlife biologist and a field researcher was kind of the perfect blend for me, because I wanted the kind of intellectual stimulation and challenge of trying to do science well to get good results. I wanted to do applied research that could help guide conservation efforts. Um, and yeah, and I love being in the field. So I went back to uni and did zoology. Um, to try and make a go of it. And I did then get to do field biology for a few years, which was amazing. Of course,
Mhm.
your career evolves eventually. But where I carried on studying skewers and other species when I was doing my degree, but I kind of always had this aim to go off to East Africa once I was kind of qualified and see what it would be like to work there. So that was my goal for at the end of the when I had my zoology degree.
And you said you're interested in punk rock, and it sounds like that never faded. Conservation to me it is always punk rock, and I talk to people like Stuart and yourself and you guys seem pretty punk rock to me, just fighting the system and constantly not listening to what the rules are and making things happen, like when you achieve the first legally recognized corridor in Tanzania. Uh, and that brings me to my next question, which is what first drew you to East Africa and the Udzungwa Mountains in particular? How do you how did your focus shift from studying primates and antelopes to becoming a leading advocate for elephants in landscape connectivity?
So I'd backpacked in a few different countries, and I was really drawn to East Africa and the beauty of the landscape, the abundance of wildlife at that time still. The people so friendly, so much interesting culture and history to explore. So when I finished my degree, I kind of begged, stole, and borrowed like £2,000 and got on a plane to Kenya to do my own self-funded study. And after 6 months, um, kind of honing some skills, doing a little research project on elephants in Savo in southeast Kenya. Um, I ran out of money and I didn't want to go back to the UK because I didn't know how long it would take me to leave again. So I went to an internet cafe in Mombasa. The internet in Kenya was very slow at that time, but I sat there for hours looking for any volunteering opportunities. And I found something down in somewhere called Udzungwa in Tanzania, which I'd never heard of, but somebody was looking for someone who was willing to go and live in the rainforest and habituate and study these endemic monkeys that had never been studied before. Actually, they'd only been described for science 20 years before that in Sanjay Mangabe. So I thought, yeah, I could do that. So I got the bus down to Udzungwa, pitched up there, went into the forest, um, recruited two Tanzanian research assistants who are still friends today. They taught me Swahili in the forest and looked after me. Um, and we lived in the forest for 3 months. So that's how I ended up in Luzunga.
That's
Bit of
crazy.
backstory, really,
That's just so
and I
crazy.
never left.
Just the fact that you saw a job posting from this place you never heard of, And you're like, okay, I'm gonna go move there. And then it says in the jungle. Was everyone on board with your decision, or did you have to convince some people that it was a
I
good
didn't
move?
have any responsibilities, I my mother is just, a wonderful mother who says, "Oh, do whatever you feel like doing that will make you happy."
Right.
And I was young and reckless and yeah, a little bit fearless. And so I just I went for it, and I certainly don't regret it.
Was there a cultural difference that you noticed right away that you had to get used to, or any adjustments? I know you said you speak Swahili now, but at the time, did you speak it?
No, I had one of those little teach yourself Swahili books and a little pocket dictionary, and I went into the forest and I learned it over those first few months, talking with my colleagues round the fire about what had happened that day, and lots of gesticulating and me writing down words I didn't know, and they were brilliant. They really helped me to learn, and just through talking, is conversation was the best way to learn Swahili. I think in terms of cultural challenges, I mean, everybody's like so friendly. And actually, there was a bit of a lag for me because my work those first few years was really focused in the forest, and I'd come out for a few days, resupply, and then go back in the forest. It's only kind of it was more after a few years when I sort of emerged and had and got really involved in the villages and community projects and learning more about the scene and how things work in Tanzania and the politics and all of that, that I kind of had to more navigate the learning, those cultural differences. But I was kind of I was lucky to have Tanzanian friends and yeah, kind of prepare for that slowly.
By the way, if anyone has a question for Trevor, please feel free to type it in the chat. You can press chat and then type whatever, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. And I promise we'll get to them eventually. But my next question, kind of off of that, is the Udzungwa Mountains are often described as Africa's Galapagos because of their extraordinary diversity and endemism. For those who haven't been there, can you help us understand what makes this landscape so unique and why it's a global priority for conservation?
Sure. So if we zoom out a little bit and look at Tanzania from a satellite, starting just in southern Kenya, but then arcing all the way through down to southern Tanzania, there are 13 different mountain blocks that are isolated massifs just rising out of the kind of the plain of Tanzania. And there was a lot of study of and surveys of these mountains happening through the 1970s and 80s into the 90s. And these mountains were all incredible places to go to as field scientists because everyone was just discovering so many new species, whether they were herpetologists or mammalogists or ornithologists. Um, in in every new of these mountain blocks that they went to, there was new species, and so the picture kind of emerged and was put together by scientists. And then in the early 90s, the phrase Eastern Arc Mountains was coined, and there's this connection between all these mountains because they're all incredibly old. They're all like hundreds of millions of years old, and the forests on them are
That
millions
old
of
for a
years
mountain?
old.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, extraordinarily old. They vary, and estimates are still being honed, but they're all extremely ancient mountains, and they've all had forests on them for millions of years, and so different processes. The isolation means that there's been a lot of speciation, so there's high levels of endemism in all of these mountain ranges. But there's also been climatic stability compared to the lowlands in between them. So there's two reasons that working in concert there that you get this incredible biodiversity and species richness. And in fact, whenever global analyses are done uh, of global biodiversity hotspots, they're usually called around the world, and it doesn't matter how, kind of what criteria you use. The Eastern Arc Mountains always come in the top 10 globally as
You know,
importance.
I think, Trevor, it's so easy for people to get the wrong impression of Africa. You know, people think that Africa is these sort of vast open plains, very
Hmm.
dry, and that's true. Um, Huge areas like the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, the South African bush. And then you're sort of driving along, as it were, and you come to these mountains, and within 10 minutes, you've gone from very, very dry areas to the kind of lush forests that you're seeing in this photograph. And the species change. You start getting big monkeys like the ones you've just shown. And you know, she showed that picture that we're seeing now of Africa. Many people would not realize how incredibly beautiful you know these places are, and how very different they are with the kind of species that occur there. Well, yeah,
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and you just walk into the forest and start walking up the mountain, and this is one of the things about Udzungwa that's special amongst all of the Eastern Arc Mountains. Is that it has continuous forest from 300 meters above sea level all the way up to like 2,300. So you move through different altitudinal zones, different habitats, and different communities of plants and animals. So you get some species that are endemic just to the submontane zone, say between 800 and 1,300 meters above sea level. And then you go up and then you meet other species.
yeah,
And even within individual forests in the Udzungwas, you have species that are found only in that forest.
yeah.
So then the numbers are staggering in terms of the species that are only found um, in these mountains. And on top of that, they're incredibly important for these mountains sustain millions and millions of Tanzanians. Um, they supply water for like more than 5 million Tanzanians. They protect the soil for millions of farmers that are downstream, and they also the amount of water coming off the mountains has been harnessed into hydroelectric power that now, like from the Uzunguas alone, it generates 30% of all of Tanzania's electricity, and
That's
that's
30%.
that's
probably
amazing. That's an amazing statistic, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean, you sort
yeah.
of think, where the hell are these places? And they're so vital to Tanzania's water supply. So
Right.
Yeah, and the forests are critical to that. If those mountains are denuded or deforested, then you lose that
yeah. I
that
mean,
source.
I was in East Africa 3 months ago. I crossed the border in Kenya. Another area within the Eastern Arc Mountains are the Taita Hills in Kenya, and they had just almost all of the forest has been cut down. There's
Mm,
clearly a lot of erosion. A lot of the species are on their last legs there.
mm,
But people who've gone out there, I mean, you talked about when we start using that word, Norman Myers, who was a very close friend of mine, invented this term biodiversity hotspot. And you know, Norman had gone out to East Africa to be to be an administrator for the British Empire, which when he went out there, they told him it would last for 1,000 years, and within 10 years, gone. But he knew these mountains were so precious.
Mm.
Anyway, I've interrupted you, but
No, you're all good. I was about to ask a, a really, really exciting development happened earlier this year. Th- uh, the in Nyeri, you're gonna have to help me pronounce that. In a Nyerere, Udzungwa Wildlife Corridor was officially designated as Tanzania's first legally recognized wildlife corridor, which is a big deal. And that happened earlier this year. Congratulations. What does that mean for the elephants, the surrounding communities, and the country? And what did it take to get this across the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor,
Yeah.
I think this photograph is one of those things that just wants to get me up on my feet and cheer. It's so exciting. So, can you tell the viewers what we're looking at?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Getting it across the finishing line for the designation. There wasn't blood involved, but there was a lot of sweat and many tears. I can say that it's definitely one of the toughest projects I've been involved in. We started it in 2018, and as you said, Andrew, we're really like honored and delighted that it's been officially recognized by the central government as the first one under the Wildlife Corridor regulations, and hopefully can really bring some momentum for corridor conservation efforts around the country. Um, as you can see in the background there is the Udzungwa Mountains,
Mhm.
magnificent forest rising up, and then the lowland, we're in the Kilombero Valley. It's an intensive agricultural, anthropogenic landscape. But less than 50 years ago, that the thin corridor that you can see coming towards you in the photo, um, that and some of the surrounding farms was all forest and woodland connecting the Udzungwas to the Nyerere Selous ecosystem, which is behind the photographer there. So this was a movement corridor that existed, that was regularly used by elephants and other wildlife, and a really important connection um, between these ecosystems. Selous Nyerere is one of the most important elephant populations in East Africa and the whole of Africa. And Udzungwa is a connection actually towards Ruaha and the second most important elephant population in East Africa. Um, and basically, all of these connections, there were several routes that elephants were using between Selous Nyerere and Udzungwa, and all of them had been blocked and um, broken up in recent decades. And so we looked at it, we did a feasibility study, and we saw that this place, it's a bit of a kind of bottleneck. It's only about 12 kilometers wide, that we should try to restore management of the corridor there. Um, Elephants were already moving, as I say. They don't forget their roots, and so as this land was converted from woodland and forest to agriculture, elephants kept moving across, and that always increases human-elephant conflict. So it was a very dangerous situation. There were a few people were killed, elephants had been killed, and the crop raiding was widespread. Really like crazy, chaotic situation.
I mean,
So,
a
yeah.
couple of things, if I may, Trevor.
Yeah.
I mean, even the name of this place. I mean, first of all, you talk about Julius Nyerere, who was the first president of Tanzania after
Mhm.
independence. Um, a, a figure that's not well known outside of Africa, probably, but he's sort of famous for me for coming up with a declaration. Um, that sort of basically said, we must look after Africa and its natural heritage. Um, so I think it was called the Arusha Declaration, and they said, look, we've got this amazing continent and we better protect it. So whatever his other controversial aspects was, it was somebody who clearly understood the country where he was from and where he became president. But the other interesting guy is the Selous. I wondered who the hell Selous was. Well, he was, I guess we would call him a big game hunter. He was somebody who went out to Africa and sort of shot wildlife and probably did a bit of ivory collection along the way. Um, and um, um, when World War One broke out, Britain was at war with Germany, and Tanzania was an African country, and he went back He went back to East Africa to fight for the British and was killed by the Germans. So these are areas that are very rich in industry, in history, and a history of the land and what it means to people. Um, I just seem to have lost Trevor. Are you still seeing him, Andrew?
I think there might have been technical difficulties with
There he
Trevor.
is. Uh,
Perfect.
Trevor is back. Um,
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, I'm back. I'm back.
No
How are
worries.
you?
and
Covered
so,
by
so
I was
we,
about to ask you.
I was ad-libbing for a bit there.
it's great
One
I,
of
stuff.
the One of the
uh,
reasons I find this exciting is that we know, and one of the places I work in is in northern Botswana, and in northern Botswana there are areas where the elephants can't follow their traditional routes because people have built fences,
Mm.
and often bad things. Often you get large numbers of elephants dying because they can't move when the conditions are. Anyway, go, Trevor, back to you again, mate.
oh, Trevor, we got a quick question from Michael. Who said, this is fascinating. Thank you, Trevor. What are some things about elephants that you wish more people knew?
Ah, so many, so many.
What are you,
I mean,
one or two?
yeah, I mean, they teach us about compassion and um, and the importance of family and community. So many things. I could just tell a quick story.
All right.
There's so many stories like this. Um, this didn't happen to me, but I know it to be true because it was witnessed by somebody I know, completely credible. Um, one of the areas where we work is called Ruaha National Park, and there's a lodge there, a tourist lodge on the river, on the Great Ruaha River, um, where elephants are quite used to people, but of course they've still definitely all had the older ones at least all had negative traumatic experiences. They've been through poaching crises. They've lost relatives. But nevertheless, they're quite calm. The ones that are used to this camp, and there's a road going through the camp, and sometimes the elephants that are local they will wander along that road between the cottages where tourists stay. Anyway, a few years back, there was a tourist from Sweden who came to this camp, and he had never been to sub-Saharan Africa before. He'd never met, megafauna in the wild before. He flew into Dar es Salaam and he was flown straight to this camp, as happens. And he arrived in the evening. He read the welcome guide in his cottage, and it said if you meet any wild animals like elephant or lion, whatever you do, don't run, because that's the worst thing to do. Just stand your ground, and hopefully the animals will leave. So he thought, okay, and because it's his habit at home, he got up at dawn the next morning and went for a jog. And he thought, and he's going down this track through the cottages in the camp. Thought, oh, this will be okay. And he notices this large group of elephants coming towards him up the track. And it's a family, and it's an elephant who's known to the people there, called Ingrid. She's a matriarch. She's about 40. She was about 43 years old at that time. She was the matriarch of the family, and she was walking along with all her like sisters and daughters behind her along this track that's about the width of a car and a half.
Okay.
And this guy thinks, okay, I read the advice. I mustn't run. And he just stands there, and he thinks, I'll stand here. I'll be fine. And she just kept coming with her family, and she kept coming. She kept coming, and he's like, no, I mustn't run. I mustn't run. Um, Probably in the end, just like froze with fear because she just kept coming, and he was like blocking the road for her family. So he walked straight up to her, and with like a gentle swish of her trunk, he pushed him. She pushed him and knocked him to the side of the road onto the ground. And he's lying there on the ground looking up at her, and she turns and she walks over, and she just like raises her front leg and gently places her foot on the guy's chest. And she just like stands there like that while the rest of the family just go around the back of her and continue down the track. And when they've all passed, she like looks and notices they've all gone past safely, and she just lifts the her foot and turns and carries on and catches up with her family like completely calmly. And that guy must have been thinking, "Ah, this is the end of me." It would have been so easy for her to kill him, even accidentally, you would think, but no. And that's just one of so many stories that blow your mind about the
Incredible.
behavior and the wisdom and the of elephants. Getting
People are
invested.
excited.
More stories about elephants.
Michael's loving these elephant stories. We all love elephants, and I just hear
Yeah.
about them.
I think it's because, like Trevor said, they are so like us in their families. Except grandmother rules. I mean, grandmother is the most important person. She's responsible for getting the her breeding herd where they need to go, which is why what we're looking at in this photograph is so exciting. It's giving them a room to roam. It's saying, look, if you want to go from Nyerere, Selous, a national park to the Udzungwas, we're going to create a path for you, which is what you can see sort of running down the middle of this. I hope I'm not going to jump your gun on the questions, Andy. Um,
Yeah.
how did this corridor come about, Trevor?
So we did a feasibility study. We presented feasible options for the corridor route to the local communities, which were based on a number of factors, including routes. We got data on the routes that the elephants were still using. Little remaining pockets of habitat, what might be politically possible, not easy. And then we started working with the communities. Um, we did like more than 2 years of consultations, about 300 meetings, um, all sorts of like focus groups with elders and women and households and farmers and different methodologies, film nights, like Q&A desks, and it took a long time because it was a really alien concept. It was really really difficult for people to imagine a corridor going through this agricultural landscape. What would that look like? How would that work? Um, they People occasionally saw and bumped into elephants, but for the most part, the elephants were moving rapidly, at night, as they do in high risk landscapes, but still causing, a lot of destruction. And so slowly, people started to realize that the situation had to be managed, and it was as much an issue of food security, but also personal security of the people, as much as it was, important for the elephants and the ecology of the landscape. Um, then we had to move to working with the village governments on redoing land use plans of their villages to agree on the maps and the set aside of the villages. Then we moved to valuation and compensation. Obviously, you can't do this in every corridor, but in this case, we actually raised almost $1 million in the end to compensate 370 households that set aside small portions of their family farms, basically for the corridor for the long term. The good thing is, I mean, it's a very narrow corridor. The area is quite small, and so in no cases were people giving up all of their farm. It was like half an acre, quarter of an acre, 1 acre, and they had remaining farmlands to because the local population is basically subsistence farmers for the most part. We asked people, do you want to be compensated with money according to the standard government processes and valuations, or would you like us to find alternative land elsewhere? Everybody said they wanted the money, partly for the reason that I just mentioned about having other farmland remaining. Um, and so we went through that whole valuation and compensation process in collaboration with the communities and the government. Parallel to that, we worked on infrastructure. We were able to get an underpass built under the highway. That was where the corridor crosses the highway. Um, and then we at the same time we're working on like community benefit schemes, setting up village savings and loan associations, microfinance schemes for these households in the villages. We have conservation agreements with the villages, which is a whole other story. We did financial training for the households, including the women, because there's good research that the women of the household make much better decisions with financially than the men do, and they were getting this boost of cash. Um, then we had to move on to how is it going to be protected, recruiting village game scouts from the villages that we're working in, so that the villages themselves are managing the scouts who are patrolling and monitoring the corridor. Then we're doing monitoring as well, camera traps and transects to document best we can the changes and the restoration of the corridor.
Trevor, I'm fairly very much aware that we're running out of time. We only have
Sorry,
15.
it's a long story.
No, this is
Fantastic
the most
story.
important.
But it would be wrong of me not to ask you. Can you talk about how we at Saving Nature got involved? I don't know whether Andy has
Mm.
slides of the underpass. Do we have any
We don't
slides
have a
of?
picture of the underpass. I wasn't able to find it, but I know which photo you're talking about. You
Okay,
maybe
so
talk
can
about it.
you sort of, I mean, I know it's only a small piece of this, Trevor, and you can show a slide of an elephant rather than the slide of me, Andrew. There we go, that's better. So can you talk a little bit about that underpass and our involvement at Saving Nature and what you're
Absolutely.
doing to document that, and then at some stage we need to turn this over to the audience so that they can ask questions. As I said, we only have about 15 minutes left.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, no, we're incredibly lucky to find Saving Nature. It's a wonderful partnership. Actually, I was introduced to Stuart and his colleagues through a mutual colleague and friend. We did a Zoom call, and then there was a site visit, and yeah, and Saving Nature just like came in and was really keen to support us, um, and have been, yeah, like really important supporter of the corridor restoration. Initially focused around the underpass and the area around the underpass. So really importantly, with the support of Saving Nature, we've um, put electric fencing along the edge of the forest to stop elephants coming out onto the road in dangerous places and also into the village. It's an ongoing process, but the plan is to keep funneling elephants through the underpass and along the corridor, and vice versa when they're coming from the other direction. And Saving Nature also, we had a lot of challenges with the underpass because we had like torrential rain, and the terrain is such that we actually had like a river that just came out of nowhere and started to flow through the underpass after we built it. So, and then extended rainy seasons because of climate change and so on. So we had to get some heavy machinery in and do the landscaping, and Saving Nature helped us with that to build these like beautiful elephant paths going in down to through the underpass and yeah, and landscaping of the corridor on the other side, and electric fencing that's starting to go down the corridor as well. Yeah, and that relationship has continued even this year. It's led to us doing some joint grant applications together with Saving Nature. So Saving Nature helping us with their like American NGO or charity status to be able to qualify for certain grant applications in the US. Um, and uh, yeah, and it's also, just been brilliant to tap into to Stuart's network and get his advice from the decades of experience of working on elephants and connectivity around Southern Africa in particular. So yeah, it's we're very lucky to have come together.
So, I mean, Andrew, if you've got one or two questions we have to answer, you have to ask, then we should try to get them answered. But then I think we need to turn this over to the floor and get people to ask Trevor questions directly.
Yeah, I'm in awe with this conversation, just learning so much about the journey. Two questions I'd ask before we turn it over. And by the way, feel free to type in questions and we'll ask them in the meantime. First one's about a monkey. Um, and you've been a part of some incredible discoveries over the years, including witnessing the Kipunji, the first new monkey genus discovered in Africa in over a century. Uh, how did that stand out to you, and what do you remember about that? To me, it's an incredible moment, and everyone wants to do something like this. So thought maybe I'd ask.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I'll try to be quick. So I mentioned that I was studying the Sanjay mangabe and other monkey species that's endemic to Udzungwa. And in 2004 and 5, started to wonder if there could be other populations of that monkey in some other remote part of one of the other forests in the Udzungwa. So I set out uh, going to remote forests to try and find them. And one place that we were at, myself and Richard Liza, um, I think it was on like day 4, we were like scanning all the monkey groups that we met because there's a diversity of monkeys. There's like 13 species of primate in Udzungwa, and the monkeys tend to form polyspecific associations, so you get mixed groups. So every single group, you have to check every single individual to see who's there because can be different species. And we were checking one such group, and then Richard, who was kind of using his naked eye, suddenly said to me, Trevor, mangabe, which was like massively exciting in itself that we might have found a third population of the mangabe. So I put my binoculars on this monkey that was like high up in the tree. I mean, the trees there are just huge. This was like 50 meters up, 100 meters away. And as soon as I put my binoculars on it, I knew it wasn't a mangabe, and it wasn't anything that I knew or anything that had been described in Udzungwa. And it was a totally like shocking moment. And then it just disappeared. Um, and I just kind of like fell over, and I won't repeat what I said because there might be children on this call. But it took me a while to recover, and so we had to, yeah, move our camp there, um, make the rations last as possible, stay another week in the forest and get documentation. We managed to do that, get some photos and vocalizations and so on. Came out of the forest, and long story short, managed to confirm that it was a new species. That is actually, yeah, in 2 mountain ranges, Udzungwa and one other mountain range. So we described that in 2005 in Science, and then the story went on. It became a new genus, and it was yeah. I mean, it just goes to show how unbelievable the Udzungwa Mountains are. That I
I
was
mean that
able to.
I
Yeah.
mean to find a new species is always exciting. Um, I have a species named after me, for which I'm very proud, but it's a wasp. I mean, I love my little wasp, but the Pimm's wasp is, I think, really
Famous
funny.
wasp.
But damn it, it's a wasp. It's not a bloody big monkey. To find something as spectacular as this is really extraordinary. Andy, I
Yeah.
think you said you had another question.
Yes,
As
well,
you can see from the photo, I got to call it the Punky Monkey. Sorry, Andrew.
What a great
full
name.
circle with the punk rock in the beginning of your career and getting it there. Yeah, we like to end this. We could open up to the audience after, but I just wanted to talk about hope and for the environment, especially now, given the threats, climate change, habitat loss, and the pressures facing both people and wildlife? What keeps you motivated? And what message would you share with everyone tonight listening who wants to make a difference?
Okay, so I made a little list because it's very, it can be really challenging to keep hope going, but it's so important, um, and to look after each other. So very quickly, some things that give me hope are definitely the people I work with, especially Tanzanian colleagues, their dedication and hard work, and helping them to grow in and become amazing at their work is definitely like one of the most rewarding things I can do. So always like, training people to come up and hopefully make you, irrelevant and out of a job is one of the most rewarding things you can do, and for hope. Um, Connecting with a wider network, and strong communities, and realizing that there's lots and lots of people out, like-minded people out there, even though it doesn't seem like it sometimes. I moved a couple of years ago from, like, in a work sense, from Twitter to LinkedIn, and that was definitely a good move because it moved from somewhere that was quite toxic to somewhere that's, quite supportive and interesting. Um, Rewilding is something I always turn to give me hope. Corridor restoration is an example of being able to do rewilding even in a country like Tanzania. Sometimes you have to be a bit activisty, we're really up against it, and sometimes you have to yeah, stand against the wind and stand up for things, and maybe make a bit of good trouble is necessary. And I think that also it keeps me going as well. Um, what message would I share with everyone listening about making a difference? I mean, the obvious, of course, sadly, money makes the world go round, and money enables conservation. If you have the resources, then please support small NGOs that will give you really good value for money and work hard to make every dollar count, towards conservation. Um, and then there's lots of things we can do. We can all do locally to try and walk the walk, but also get involved in campaigns against, what are the real problems, the big corporations and the destructive companies, um, and but also, yeah, let's, look after each other as a community of people who care about nature, because it's tough times and we have to look after ourselves and look after each other as well.
So in 8 minutes, Trevor and I are going to turn into pumpkins, or whatever. Um, so with the 8 minutes left, what questions do people have? What would people like to ask of Trevor and this project?
I got asked just about where is it? Um, what is the importance of having relationships with communities for this corridor? Uh, why is that balance so important for conservation to succeed?
I mean, it's absolutely critical. We as people are the ones who have the power to destroy or to conserve. Um, and a corridor like that, is only going to, survive and persist in the long term if it has, um, the respect, and approval of and protection of the local people, long after we're gone. So that's a process about, uh, people feeling the benefits. In the short term, we can take actions and work with communities to help them feel the benefits of the corridor. Um, that might be direct, or it might be through livelihood, incentives or innovative projects. And in the long term, education and, helping people, yeah, to, and nurturing values of like connecting and conserving with nature are in there in Tanzanian people. Some people, have lost it because of history, because of being excluded maybe from protected areas, because of turning against nature conservation, or because of, poverty and the day-to-day realities. And it's difficult for many people um, to have the space in their life for nature conservation. But that's our job as conservationists and NGOs, is to support communities. Um,
Another
as yeah.
another question we just got asked from Amy was, can Trevor clarify what two habitat areas the corridor connects for the elephants? Do they use the Udzungwa Mountains? Aren't they savanna elephants?
Yeah, it's a great question, because people look at the Udzungwa Mountains and think, oh, it must be forest elephants in there. But no, the forest elephants are further west, outside of Tanzania, in the Congo Basin. In Tanzania, we only have savanna elephants, but these are savanna elephants using forests. Um, so the savanna elephants are kind of more adaptable than you might expect. These elephants, um, they they come from the Nyerere ecosystem, which is mostly dry bush, miombo woodland, yeah, very, dry woodland, open bush, some wetland, a mosaic of habitats, but more what you would associate with savanna elephants. And then they come across the valley and they go up into the forested mountains of the Udzungwa, and they're quite
What,
happy
what's
using
amazing
that habitat as well.
What's
Yeah.
amazing about that is we tend to think that elephants don't like walking up hills, and
Mm.
by and large they don't. But when they have to, they walk up hills. And I find at my age walking up
They
hills
will.
hard work, but I can't imagine what it must be like when you weigh as much as an elephant. So
They,
anyway,
yeah.
we are now out of time. Trevor, thanks so much, mate, for doing this. This has been absolutely fantastic. It's good to see you again. It's good to hear your story. Andy, who sets these up, always wants to know how we got where we are. Um, and so obviously I have to end with the commercial. I think Andy is probably going to flash up the final slide, which tells you, there we go. So please visit our website at Saving Nature, savingnature.com or savingnature. Various other things, and look at what we're doing. Look at this project. It's part of our commitments for reconnecting nature. We realize that um, what we have left is not all of the planet. We've destroyed big chunks of it, but we need to make sure that the chunks that we've left behind, we can connect together. And this is a very, very brave and ambitious project to connect two areas of forest. So I think without further ado, I'm gonna, thank you, mate. Thanks for
Thank you,
Thanks.
thanks for
Thanks
Trevor.
so
doing
much,
this.
Stuart. Thank you, Andrew and Aaron, and everyone who joined us. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
All right,
Everyone saying thank you in the chat, Trevor and Stuart, and how interesting this was. So thank you so much. And like Stuart said, please check out our website if you want to learn more, and or email any of us, and we're happy to talk.
absolutely. Take care. See you in a couple of weeks,
Cheers.
Trevor.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Stuart.